So, how does a major financial firm get hit with a massive penalty for basically letting scammers run wild? Well, today we're digging into this incredible story of systemic failure, a high stakes cover up, and of course, the investors who ultimately paid the price.
Yeah, $80 million. That's the massive civil money penalty that the U.S. Treasury's crime-fighting unit, we call them FinCEN, slapped on a financial firm called Canaccord Genuity. It is one of the biggest fines of its kind, and it's a giant red flag that their defenses against financial crime had completely broken down.
But a number that big, it's easy to just see it as a corporate problem. The thing is, this story is about way more than that. It's about how those failures created a total playground for market manipulators, leading to huge fraud schemes that targeted regular people.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with that giant penalty, then talk about the rules Canaccord was supposed to be playing by. After that, we'll see how their whole system just fell apart, uncover the shocking cover-up, and finally, look at the actual pump and dump scams that thrive because of all this.
Right, so first up, that $80 million penalty. FinCEN didn't just say Canaccord made a mistake. They said the company willfully violated the Bank Secrecy Act. And that's a big deal. That's the foundational law meant to stop money laundering and other major financial crimes in the U.S.
But to really get why this is such a huge failure, you gotta understand the rules of the game. See, firms like Canaccord aren't just businesses. They're basically the gatekeepers of our financial system. They have a legal duty to be the cops on the beat, policing their own platforms for crime.
And their main weapon in this fight? It's something called an anti-money laundering program, or AML for short. The best way to think about it is like a company's immune system. It's supposed to detect and fight off illegal activity before it spreads and does real damage.
And a healthy immune system, a good AML program, is built on 5 key things they call pillars. You need strong internal controls, you need independent testing to make sure it works, a compliance officer who actually has some power, real training for the staff, and you have to know who your customers are. As you're about to see, Canaccord basically just failed on all 5, spectacularly.
Okay, so this is where we get to the heart of it. A compliance system that was just completely, totally broken. And here's why that's so bad. Canaccord was a huge player in penny stocks, which, if you don't know, is like the Wild West of the stock market, just notorious for fraud. So their defenses, they needed to be like Fort Knox. Instead, they were more like a screen door.
So you'd think they'd have something sophisticated, right? Well, their main defense was a bunch of automated reports that were supposed to flag sketchy trading. And on paper, the idea makes sense. Let the computers find the weird stuff, then have the humans take a closer look. But in practice, it was an absolute disaster.
And this is where you see the total disconnect between what was supposed to happen and what actually did. These reports were the safety net, right? But the employees were so overwhelmed and had zero guidance, so they started plugging in arbitrary numbers just to cut down the alerts and make their workload manageable. Some of the most important reports, the ones designed to catch pump and dump schemes, were just ignored. Not for days, but for months, and in some cases, even years.
And this quote right here just perfectly sums up the chaos. An employee literally told investigators they stopped reviewing a 53-page report that came out every single day. The reason? They said management never even told them what they were supposed to be looking for. So the system wasn't just broken, it was completely rudderless.
And you can trace this problem right back to day one. The very people they hired to be the expert compliance staff, they were just thrown in the deep end. No real AML training. One person even called it a trial by fire. They were hiring people for jobs that didn't even mention AML as a responsibility, and then just expected them to somehow magically guard the gates.
Okay, so everything we've talked about so far is pretty bad, right? Well, hold on, because this is where the story takes a much darker turn. This whole mess went from just being negligent and incompetent to an active, deliberate cover-up. We're not just talking about a system that failed anymore. We're talking about a system whose failures were willfully hidden.
So what happens when the regulators, in this case FINRA, show up and say, hey, show us the proof that you're actually reviewing these critical reports? Well, at Canaccord, panic set in. And one employee literally falsified almost 400 documents, just made them up, creating a fake paper trail out of thin air to pretend they were doing their job. And get this, it wasn't just one rogue employee. A second person joined in, faking their own records. They even backdated company policies to make it look like the rules had been in place the whole time. This is where it crosses a huge line, right? It's not just incompetence anymore. This is a conspiracy, a deliberate plan to lie to the people who police the entire system.
So you have all this failure and deception on the inside. What does that lead to on the outside? Well, it had devastating real-world consequences. Canaccord's completely broken system became an absolute paradise for criminals running those classic pump-and-dump schemes. And we've got a couple of jaw-dropping examples.
All right, case study number 1, a company called Oncology Pharma, stock ticker ONPH. Now, they were supposedly developing cancer drugs. Sounds noble, right? But according to federal prosecutors, it was all a front. It was really a vehicle for a massive fraud that raked in over $150 million in illegal profits.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It's insane. In less than 2 months, this stock goes from 42 cents to a peak of $50. A 400% spike in a single month, that is the absolute textbook definition of a pump and dump. And Canaccord? They were a key market maker, processing almost $100 million in these transactions.
And the red flags here were not subtle. I mean, they were waving everywhere. The company looked like a shell company, it had that sudden, insane price spike, no real history or revenue, and it was being hyped up all over the internet with bogus promotions. A functioning compliance program would have slammed the brakes on this immediately, but Canaccord's system, it saw nothing. Absolutely nothing.
You might think, okay, maybe that was just a fluke, they missed one. But no, it wasn't a one-off. Let's take a look at another one, Blue Eagle Lithium. This was a similar pump and dump where the bad guys allegedly made over $5 million by manipulating the stock of a so-called mining company.
And if you can believe it, the warning signs here were even more obvious. The company does a total 180, changes its name and business model overnight. That's a classic shell company move. But here's the kicker. The SEC, the actual Securities and Exchange Commission, issued a temporary trading suspension on the stock because of unusual and unexplained market activity. And even worse, someone inside Canaccord actually recommended reporting the activity, and they were just ignored.
So that all brings us to the final verdict. After years of willful failure, of outright deception, and of basically enabling widespread fraud, the bill finally came due for Canaccord.
So that $80 million headline number, here's how it actually breaks down. $40 million of it gets credited for payments they already had to make to the SEC and FINRA for their own investigations. Another $35 million goes straight to the U.S. Treasury. And that last $5 million, it's suspended, basically held over their head on the condition that Canaccord finally cleans up its act.
So in the end, what this all really shows us is that these anti-money laundering rules, they aren't just some boring, bureaucratic red tape. They are the wall. They're the barrier that stands between sophisticated criminal networks and the rest of us. The Canaccord case is just a brutal reminder of what happens when that wall isn't just left to crumble, but is actively torn down. And it leaves us with one really important question. When the gatekeepers fail, who's the...
Thank you for watching this lesson. If you found it helpful, please like the video and subscribe for more AML and compliance training. If you would like to earn an anti-money laundering certificate, please visit www.nasiacademy.ca. The first course is free and eligible for certification. I'll see you in the next lesson.